Welcome back to Random Rants of the Plaid Guy, where the Plaid Guy is going to tell you he's not reviewing a movie right now. It's kind of a slow week. I haven't been able to get to the movies yet for $5 Tuesdays at AMC. By the way, it's a really good deal, especially if you're a Stubbs member. $5 Tuesdays. I'm hoping to get to the movie soon to go see Solo, and I know there's another movie tucked in right behind there that I'm going to desperately try to go see. How do I put this? The other big movie I'm really waiting on is Ant-Man and Wasp, which is not coming out till later. I'm really not looking forward to Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. Jurassic World was pretty good, wonky in parts, not as good as the others, did redeem a little bit of the franchise, but that's another story for another day. For right now, we are going to be talking about how to make a movie. So movies, unlike other art forms, are a group project. They require strong leadership, strong vision, and strong conviction in order to get something done. It's not easy. It's hard. You're going to go through blood, sweat, and tears. I've never made a movie myself except for these videos, but I can tell you from what I read, it's a miracle that any movie gets made. And a lot of the times, it's things you don't suspect happening really making your movie. We'll go more into this, but I'm going to take you from beginning, middle, and end. And there's a lot of in between. But first, we're going to start off with the history of the movies. Now, pictures are not that new. From painting, from cave drawings to paintings, coming up into right around the early 19th century, Thomas Edison had created his moving image camera, basically creating the first camera in the United States. However, Thomas Edison was basically a giant gangster and patented it all over the Northeast. And when somebody else would try to make something similar and try to show off movies, because you have to understand, back when movies first came out, like, people walking was, like, huge. But, Edison would send his thugs to beat up people, or he'd straight out sue people. This all changed, eventually, when people discovered California. The moving image camera had not been patented in California, plus, they relocated to Southern California. So that way, in case the federal government or Thomas Edison came after them, they could run away to Mexico. Now, this is also important because three of the major people who created Hollywood went there and created the first three major motion picture studios, which are still there today, which are Warner Brothers, Fox, 20th Century Pictures. These are the founding gods of Hollywood. And then eventually we have MGM and Paramount and also RKO and Republic Pictures, which came later. But, like, this is the very early foundation of the movie industry. Now, movies you have to understand, especially when they were first made, and even until today, movies were made for a specific audience. In the early 1900s, they were more made for heads of households, mostly male, mostly very rich, who were the only ones who were able to go see the movies. And we're talking like the silent era. When we get up to right around the 1920s and 30s, that's when we start to see the movies used more as a medium for communication. By that I mean we start seeing newsreels, we start seeing cartoons for kids. Back in the day, you could pay like 5 cents and stay in the movies all day and nobody would care. People would do that and you would see news reports all the time. I mean, there's that famous scene in Public Enemies when John Dillinger found out that the FBI was after him because he saw a news report about him in a movie theater. But, I digress. But movies have always been a target of money. And it's simple economics of supply and demand of how a movie gets made. Is there a demand for said product? Yes. Do we have the means? Yes. Then we make it. And we have to make it for a profit. Because you understand, like, movies are a business. We have to make a profit. There's a bottom line that has to be met. Now, can artistic vision and bottom line marry each other? Yes. And that's the whole point to me of the movie industry is the artistic image as well as the economics of business marrying each other in perfect harmony. When those two work together, there is nothing better. Now, when those two don't work together, that's when we get disasters. But we will get to all that later. Now we'll talk about let's start with the very first movie that really made an impact, Birth of a Nation. This is where, I'm not kidding, a man in blackface tries to rape a white woman. She falls over a cliff. The KKK victoriously come in, lynch him. No, I'm not making this up. That was the entire movie. I just summed up 80 minutes for you. This was also made back in the day. This would never happen today. Birth of the Nation is also a subject of controversy because of, like I said, the racial overtones, and especially of the we white men gotta do something about these black folk. Now, I'm talking about this because this is a movie that, like, even Woodrow Wilson said that it was like history written with lightning. This was a movie that was like considered to be one of the first epics, even though it's a totally racist movie. It was the first movie to use a lot of the same techniques that we use now for dramatic storytelling. It was one of the first ones to really show the medium. I mean, people were experimenting and playing with it, but D.W. Griffith was the first one to actually really make moving story images. And that's a very distinct thing. Whereas a book, you read it and you make the images in your head, or you listen to it on the radio, you make the images in your head. These were dynamic, visual, telling images. This supports the whole rule in all of movie making, which is show, don't tell. That movie was made for probably about $2 million. I actually had to look it up. It grossed, I believe, over $100 million, making it a huge thing. Now, D.W. Griffith was super mad that people considered him a racist. Which, gee, I wonder why. So he made a really, really good movie, which I've heard good things about. I need to find a copy of, called Intolerance. Taking 3 different stories about intolerance. One is a biblical story. One is about a woman losing her child in the modern day, which in that era was the 1930s. It's all completely silent. I forgot what the third one is, but go see it, because this is another one where it's the dynamic use of storytelling. Now, right where we're at now, where we're at with D.W. Griffith, we're at the silent era. Everything changed when the movies could talk. Once the movies could talk, now you've got a bigger selling point. Now, when movies could talk, we were still trying to figure things out. In order to hide microphones, they did a lot of things, like you'd have 2 characters sitting at a bar, but you don't realize that the lantern that's in the bar is actually a microphone. And they also had to speak very slowly, which is why movies back then feel a little bit slower paced, because they were afraid of the microphone and making sure it picked everything up. Now, everything changed when James Cagney came around. James Cagney, because he played a thug in the movie Public Enemy, which is a really great movie. I've seen that one. Go see that one, because that's a beautiful picture. He originally was not supposed to be in it. However, the director at the last minute decided to switch the 2 roles, because it was supposed to be him and his friend, and eventually he switched it because James Cagney actually was raised on the streets. He actually knew how to hustle. And James Cagney could speak really, really fast. Well, see, yeah, here, very, very fast, which was exactly what was needed, and it made a huge impact, and it created and stamped him as a legend in Hollywood. Now, it's somewhat controversial because it's something he kind of regretted, and eventually he made a bunch of very family-friendly musical pictures to try to, like, get rid of that gangster image, which I believe he's probably the only person in history to have done that, because normally it's the opposite. But eventually we get up to the epics. And this is when movies are ballooning. Now, Cleopatra, which was Fox's huge production for Elizabeth Taylor. Originally, the story goes is Elizabeth Taylor was just bullshitting around, and when Fox called her and said they wanted her to be in this epic, She said, "Okay, I'll do it for like $2 million." No, if they're gonna agree to it. No, they agreed to it because they wanted her desperately. Cleopatra is also considered a big flop in Hollywood. It did not make its money back, and for the longest time, this changed budgets in Hollywood because now we're coming into an era when things have to be done cheaply. Gone were the days of the huge epics because movie studios were originally at that point going bigger budget, bigger return, which we still kind of do now. However, this was the beginning of the freewheeling dealing era. Now, it kind of came back in the 70s with the new Hollywood era, where we talk about Steven Spielberg and George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola and Martin Scorsese, but that won't be till later. The other thing that came around, which changed movies a lot, was television. Because now people had readily accessible images in their home that they could watch any time of the day. You have to understand, when television first came around in the 50s, like, and this is for, if you're of a certain age, then you already know this. Television had a definite start and end time. There was no in between. It was 6 a.m. to probably around 12:30 a.m. and that was it. Between 12:30 a.m. and 6:30 a.m., there was nothing going on. Now, when television came around, the movie studios realized that they needed to catch on this, so they quickly formed television divisions and started selling their old movies and shorts and cartoons into television, so that way that more people could access it. This was a huge thing. It led to a resurgence in horror movies, Boris Karloff and Bela Lugosi, and then it led into a big boom when we come into, the Three Stooges. Now, we're going back and forth. I'm going up to the 50s. We're going to skip all the way ahead to 1977. We're going to talk about Star Wars. Star Wars was the movie that changed everything. Before we talk about Star Wars, we need to talk about a little bit of the history beforehand. We need to talk about how movie studios were producing good movies, solid work, with big budgets, but they were always carefully controlled, as well as it was more of a, here's money, go make us something. It was a nice kind of free will and time in Hollywood. And it all changed really with Jaws. When Steven Spielberg got the budget, it was kind of minuscule. Then it grew bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then eventually he couldn't handle it anymore. And there's all sorts of disasters and catastrophes. But I've already said enough, and we're almost running out of time right now. We're going to go next week, and we're going to talk about more the history of Hollywood. We're going to go past Star Wars, talk about the big budgeted films. Then we're going to talk about how a movie gets made. Just wanted to get you a nice foundation with the history. Anyway, like, comment, share. Tell all your friends, enemies, I don't care. Tell them all about me. Let me know how I'm doing. If you need me to be a bit more focused, I'm trying to keep things a little bit more structured with this, because everything can go everywhere. But for right now, all I'll say is, this is the Plaid Guy going. I didn't choose the Plaid Life. Plaid Life chose me.